Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graven. Our guest today is Davina Frederick of Wealthy Woman Lawyer. So, for more than a decade, Davina has helped women law firm owners scale to $1 million and beyond while maintaining an enjoyable work life balance. She also hosts a podcast called Wealthy Woman Lawyer. It's the top podcast for women in law in the US, and she's the author of two books on marketing and management. There'll be links to all of that in the show notes. So, Davina, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well, Mark. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. For those who are just listening, you missed Davina pointing up to the books up over her head. While we're at it, go ahead and tell everyone the titles of those two books, please.
There are two books in a Wealthy Woman Lawyer Guide series. I haven't gotten around to writing the third one yet, but the first one is The Wealthy Woman Lawyer's Guide to Law Firm Marketing in the Virtual Age. And there's a long subtitle. And the other one is The Wealthy Woman Lawyer's Guide to Building a Systems-Driven Law Firm Business. So marketing and systems are the two topics we cover in those books.
Well, great. Well, I think we'll have a chance to talk about that later in the episode, and I'm sure there's ideas that will apply. I'm curious to explore how that might apply to other professional services as well. So, as we always do here, Davina, first things first, the main question of the different things you've done in your career, what's your favorite mistake?
My favorite mistake, I think, would really surprise a lot of people because going to law school, I think, is my favorite mistake.
Oh,
And
really?
I think a lot of people would be shocked that I would think that that was a mistake. I've been a lawyer now for about 18 years,
Mm-hmm.
but I have not actively practiced. I'm still actively licensed, but I have not actively practiced in the last few years because I've been running a coaching business for lawyers, teaching them about how to grow their law firm businesses like I did when I graduated from law school and started my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that it was a mistake because some really hard years followed that decision. I obviously I was debt free before I started law school. And obviously, I invested money in going to law school and borrowed money to do that. And I'm almost finished paying it off. So that
Mm-hmm.
tells you how long it takes to pay off a loan. And it wasn't nearly as much as a lot of my fellow students borrowed to go to law school. And I went to a private Catholic law school. And so it was a little more costly. And I did have scholarships, which helped me. But in the years that followed, I discovered kind of the hard way that being a lawyer wasn't what I envisioned that it would be.
Mm-hmm.
And at that particular stage of my life, had I gone to law school when I was a lot younger, I think it would have been a really great decision. But because I was about 40, I was 42 when I graduated and started my own firm, my life began to change. I began to go through some changes myself as I aged. And I didn't, sitting all day behind a desk
Mm-hmm.
or the stress of going to court, and I was a litigator, was really too hard on me physically and emotionally. And I decided that my first law firm out of law school, I built it, grew it very successfully. I brought in a partner, we hired lawyers and staff and the whole routine, set up systems, and we were making money. But I wound up walking away from it because I realized it wasn't how I wanted to spend the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I took about a year off and worked with my husband, and we had a high performance fitness training gym at the time. And so I'm a certified trainer, and we worked in that for a year. And I kind of thought, okay, what am I going to do? I went to law school, and so I started a second law firm, and I really got involved in hiring coaches. I had several different coaches, some group coaches, some private coaches that I hired to really teach me a lot of things that I think I was missing when I started my own business out of law school. A lot of mindset, really, and also just improving my ability um, to improve my systems and stop trying to do everything myself. I was still trying, even though I had people working for me, I was still stuck in the doing way too much. And I think that's a kind of a curse of high achieving people. We get very caught up in the doing, because the doing is what got us there as high achieving people. And
Mhm.
then when we're trying to scale up business and grow it beyond us, we don't really realize that there's a next level that goes beyond us being the one to push that rock up the hill right by ourselves. So I invested a lot in coaching, and I opened my second law firm, and then things were a lot different for me after that, because I realized, okay, there was a lot I did not know
Mhm.
about running a business. And I thought I would, because I had had a career in marketing for 15 years
Mhm.
prior to that.
Yeah.
So I was kind of thinking, oh, this will be no problem, start my own business. My husband was an entrepreneur and he really inspired me. And so I had to take a step back. And then eventually, that is what led to me starting this coaching business, because my experience in coaching was so powerful and so transformative. And I had a lot of other women lawyers asking me how I did it, how I was being successful. And so that led me to down the coaching path, which I've been doing now for 12 years, coaching women law firm owners. And I started out coaching all sorts of different professionals. So I have worked with other professional service business owners as their coach. And then eventually it just sort of, I made a decision to narrow my message and my niche and focus just on women law firm owners.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing your story, and there's things I think we can kind of peel back from that story. I'm glad that mistake of going to law school led to something that you seem much happier with now.
Yeah. Well, not only that, I think that um, one of the real benefits that came out of law school that I really appreciate is it made me much better it made me a smarter person, right? Like, it made me much better at learning how to analyze and problem solve, because that's what they teach you in law school. They teach you how to think like a lawyer. So they teach you how to analyze problems and make an argument for whatever side, right? Whichever side, both sides. And so those critical thinking skills have been very powerful in my life since then. So I look back on it, and it was a mistake in that, for many years I was like, oh, what did I do? And
Mhm.
I made this investment and I had to keep going down this path to make it work.
Mhm.
But reflecting on it now, many years later, obviously there was a tremendous amount of benefit came from it, and I wouldn't have the coaching business I have now, but for what I had gone through. and
Mhm.
and um, and other lawyers, relate to me more because I am a lawyer. I've had
Mhm.
my own business, and I know what it takes to make it successful. And now I've had many, thank goodness, wonderful success stories of other women law firm owners who have grown really successful $1 million, multi-million-dollar businesses without grinding themselves in the ground in the process. So that's even more exciting to me.
Yeah. So, yeah, I didn't realize until you told the story that you didn't go. It sounds like a vast majority of law students go straight through from undergrad and immediately into law school, right?
Right. I did not do that. It was a second career for me.
So
And
what prompted the second career?
well, it was kind of interesting because I went to school undergrad to be a journalist. It was my journalism major,
Mhm.
is what I graduated in. And I really particularly loved print journalism, newspapers, that kind of thing. And so I worked some, going through college at local papers. Well, by the time I graduated, I had met and married my first husband. And we lived in Orlando, and there was only one game in town, which is the Sentinel. Anybody who knows anything about Orlando, Florida, the Orlando Sentinel's it. So I had been working at the Sanford Herald, and my supervisor was making about $13,000 a year, and I thought, yeah, that's probably not a great career move for me. So I wound up going into marketing by happenstance. I began to apply for jobs where writers prevail, and marketing was one of those. And that's what got me started actually in professional service businesses marketing, because I
Mhm.
worked for an engineering firm, and then I worked for the largest law firm in town as a marketer. And I worked for an agency then ultimately. And so I had this whole career, and then but it was nothing that I really picked for myself. It's something I sort of settled into and found a way to make it work, because we were staying in Orlando because of my husband. Well, we wound up getting divorced, and eventually he's actually passed away now. but we wound up getting divorced. And I, uh, some years later, met and married my second husband. And he just provided an opportunity for me. He said, go and do whatever it is you want to do. He was working, making plenty of money, so I didn't have to worry about bills and whatnot. And I said, okay, well, let me think about it. And I actually wrote a pro and con chart. I had like 3 or 4 different career ideas, and I did sort of pros and cons of each. And I talked to different people that I trusted. And my cousin is the only other attorney in our whole family, extended family, and everything. And he has a passion for the law. And he told me, he said, you really should go to law school. I think you'll love it, everything. And so I kind of followed his advice, and I sort of did weighed out my pros and cons list. And my teacher was on there, but I only wanted to teach like elementary students. And my husband was like, you'll get fired like the first week because you'll curse at some little kid. And then and I'm like, okay, probably so. So
That
my
would have been,
personality is probably a little more suited for a courtroom.
yeah.
Um,
Teaching would have been a mistake, it sounds like. Yes.
yeah. So that was what kind of let me. I'm super grateful to the people who supported me in that decision, and my husband was really a key person in that. And I also wanted to. As an entrepreneur, he had a very successful business working for law firms. He's not a lawyer, but he's a technology consultant, and I really loved his lifestyle. I love the entrepreneur kind of lifestyle, and I was inspired by that. And so when I went to law school, my plan for the very beginning was to start my own law firm when I graduated, which is kind of an unusual path. But I thought to myself, well, I'm in my 40s by then. I started law school at like 38 or something. I said, I'm in my 40s and I've had a previous career.
Yeah.
I have, this entrepreneurial spouse. Well, I could figure this out, right? And I did, but it was just a lot harder. I didn't really think about being a baby lawyer and a baby business owner at the same time and trying to do it all. I knew how to get work because I had been to a million rubber chicken dinners through my marketing career. So I knew how to network and get work, and that was not a problem. And I also had some really good mentors. The county I was in Florida at the time, in the Seminole County, and that's a bedroom county of Orange County, where Orlando is. And it's kind of a small town county feel to it. So when you're in the legal community there is very tight knit. And my father-in-law, who had passed away actually just before I married my husband, he was an attorney in that area for many, many years. So the Frederick last name was pretty well known. And so I have a lot of people who sort of helped me along the way so I didn't have to turn in my bar card that first couple of years. Some good mentors. So that's really how I wound up going. And like I said, I don't, looking back now, and for many years now, I don't regret. The education is just wonderful, and I recommend to anybody that the education and how it teaches you to think is just life changing. But financially, it really wasn't the brightest decision at the time.
Yeah.
I probably could have gone on and made more money in my marketing career over time. So I was basically starting over.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about what happened, between the first firm and starting the second. Did you shut down the first firm? Did you sell
No,
it?
I
What was
didn't actually.
the thought process? Was that a struggle to reach that decision?
Yeah. So I didn't shut it down actually. So I technically had 3 law firms, but I kind of blend the first 2 because I started the firm and I had it for about a year, and then I brought in a partner, and she's still a good friend of mine. I just talked to her a couple weeks ago. She is graduated from law school the year before me, and she was working someplace else. And I said, I'd really like to have you come and join me in my law firm. And so she did. And we built our business on real estate litigation. If you remember, I started my firm in 2007. If you remember what happened in 2008,
Right.
it was the end of 2007. I started it, and we started getting these sort of whispers that what was going on down in Miami, there were a lot of foreclosures happening. And I got the word that the chief judge in Orange County, which is one of the largest counties in Florida, had issued a administrative order requiring these Miami firms that represented lenders to get local counsel.
Mhm.
And so I reached out then. So I found out on the day that he did it. And so I got a list from somebody in the courthouse of a few firms that were calling in for out of Miami, and I knew they would need local counsel. And I cold called. I called all of them. I asked to speak to their head of their foreclosure department, and I said, "This administrative order just came down the pipe, and I want to be your local counsel."
Yeah.
And so that is how I kicked off, and that is how I made so much money, really, quite frankly, in my
Mhm.
because that foreclosure crisis
Yeah.
lasted many, many years.
I
And
made a mistake. I made a mistake there in thinking, oh, 2008 bad environment, but for you in that work, it was actually, I mean, it
yeah,
was a
for the lawyer. Well, we all joked about all of the foreclosure lawyers, all the local counsel. We, of course, all knew each other. They're in the courthouse every day, and we would joke about how when this foreclosure crisis was over, we would all be filing bankruptcy because that was our business, you know.
yeah.
But we built the firm. We were also doing divorce, family law, estate planning, and some real estate law as well. So we were diversifying as we were doing that, but so what I did is I actually just sold out to my partner,
Yeah.
and I just said, you take it. And part of it was that she was quite a bit younger than I was at the time, and she had kind of a different vision for the direction she wanted to go in. She wound up continuing to operate that firm. She just closed it down December of 2024. She turned it into a local counsel service that she continued and spread out all over the Southeast, just doing local counsel. So she amassed a team of people, of attorneys and contacts. So eventually that's where she took it. She made a lot of money. It went really well for her. And I wound up, when I started my practice back, I started an estate planning and business firm. And that's what I did, was estate planning and business. For me, that was, I chose to have a virtual firm. This was in 2011,
Yeah.
and it was nobody was had virtual firms back then,
Mm.
and I had a lot of naysayers. I had a one of somebody that was in the bar with me. He wanted me to rent space in his building, and I said, "Well, I'm not going to do that right off the bat. I'm just going to, work virtually." I had a home office. And he says, "Your clients are not going to like that." And of course, it was because he wanted me to pay this really high rent in his
Right.
building. And I was like, "Well, let's try it, see." It turned out my clients loved it because I worked with a lot of elderly people in different parts of Florida, and they didn't have to drive to my office. They didn't have to drive to me. I conducted most of it over email and phone and mail. And we didn't have the tools that we've had since the pandemic. We have amazing tools for working virtually, and a lot of attorneys grow law firms virtually. But I just did it. That's how I started out, and then I just grew it from there. And then it came to the point where I had then started my coaching business a couple of years later. So then I got to a point where I had to go all in on one or the other, because I can't do both of these at the same time. Like if I had grew something successfully, then I could add something else, but
Mhm.
I couldn't do both of them. They were at a breaking point, a tipping point, right? And so
Yeah.
I really thought about it, and I chose the coaching
Yeah.
business.
Well, yeah. And I appreciate that. I mean, I hear you talking about how with that second firm, it sounds like you tried or that you did avoid repeating some of the mistakes that led to you not appreciating it the first time, like staying out of the courtroom,
Right.
being able to
Staying out of
work
courtroom for me
differently.
was big.
Yeah.
Also, I was the first time I hired a lot of people, but I was still too involved in looking at everything before it went out and not developing that sort of trust. So one of the things I teach my clients now is, so many of us, we are solo or small firm, we start hiring people,
Mhm.
and then we still are the bottleneck in our business because we don't trust that anything can go out of our office without us
Right.
looking at it first, right? And so one of the methods that I've learned that I teach my clients now is, that they've got to stop being the bottleneck. So they've got to stop what I call grading papers.
Mhm.
So I'm doing my work, and then everybody who works for me has to stack stuff up on my desk that I have to review before it goes out, because they're going to screw it up if they don't. And it's a perfectionism tendency that a lot of us have, and fear that our name is attached to it. And so I teach a method where you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to grade papers, spreading, mark everything up. And then along with that, the mindset that goes with that, because you really need to evolve how you think about things, so you can begin to develop some trust and some systems that will
Mhm.
help you build that trust,
Yeah.
to get yourself out of being the bottleneck in your business. So that's an example of some of the things that I did the second time around that were different.
Yeah. And I want to come back and talk about systems and a systems driven firm. But yeah, one other thing to go back to, I think it's interesting that, in 2011, starting a virtual firm, from your standpoint, seemed like the right thing to do. When you have naysayers, I think it's fascinating the language of somebody saying, you're making a mistake. And like all that means is that they're making a different prediction than you are. You think the virtual
Mhm.
firm was going to work. They think it was not. Well, it sounds like it proved out you weren't wrong. You were ahead of the curve. I'm sure that's become a much.
Right, right, right. And I think I've always been a little bit of a maverick, and sometimes I'm a little too leading edge in that I do things and that I'm like, you know, I have to learn the hard way, right? I have to try it and do it. I don't really listen to people. But for me, it was really a matter of I was really focused. I had some good coaching around what what makes me happy, what it is that I wanted, what it is I needed, what would work for me. And I also took a step back. I had some things going on in my personal life at the time that affected a lot of these decisions and why I made these decisions. So it wasn't purely a work decision. There was some family considerations. Um, but unfortunately, I've had a lot of naysayers, and I've had some that are close to me because, usually it's people who are close to you who have fear for you and worry about these kinds of things, and say some things to me that, were very hurtful, detrimental, in their sort of view of what I do and how I do it. But I just, at one point, I had to make a decision to not ask for any more advice, not seek any more opinions, and just get really quiet. And I had this like little flicker of an idea of what I wanted. And I just got really quiet so I could hear that voice inside of me and say, what is it you really want? Because I had a lot of people say, you could do this, you could do that, you could go into this area of practice, you can become a speaker, you can do the, like everybody's got an opinion and a viewpoint about what you can do.
Sure.
And when you have talents in different areas, it can be confusing. And so when I talked about choosing between the practice and the coaching, that was a huge decision where I had to think about, what is it that I felt that I enjoyed more? What is it I felt would be the benefits of each, the pros and cons of each for me? And I had to sort of shut out other people's opinions about that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not an easy thing to do because, we all love our loved ones and we value their opinions, but sometimes you have to really think, get really quiet and listen to that inner voice and say, what is it I really want from my
Yeah.
life? And then kind of take that risk.
Yeah. So I mean, there's that mistake of putting too much stock in what other people are saying instead of going with your gut, or as an entrepreneur, going and testing an idea.
Hmm.
And if it turns out to be wrong or a little bit wrong, you can adjust. It doesn't mean you
Right. Well,
fail.
and you're going to have wrong decisions. Like
Right.
it's a given. Any one thing I've learned in as many years and many businesses as we've had is that there are going to be many mistakes. There are going to be many wrong decisions and wrong turns, but every one of them teaches you something about yourself, if
Right.
nothing else.
Yeah, it doesn't. Making a mistake doesn't mean you're a bad person or a bad entrepreneur or a bad lawyer.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I
if
think
you're not making mistakes, well, then you must be like an alien or a divine, God
or,
on the planet or something because
or yeah.
everybody's making mistakes in the life and in business.
And I think if you're not making mistakes, you're not doing anything new.
Taking any
Pushing,
risk.
you're not
Yeah.
taking any intelligent risks. We don't want to be reckless, but even when we think we're taking intelligent risks, there are mistakes that happen. And yeah, I mean, as we talk about here on the podcast all the time, let's learn quickly and adapt instead of repeating or doubling down on.
Yeah, and one of the things is it's interesting you bring that learn quickly up. One of the things that I'm always talking with my clients about, and this is something I had to develop too. So I know I don't mean to say it as a, like, oh, here's this great thing I know and you don't. But it is that the longer we stay in our feelings about something, the longer we're harming ourselves and our business. So I give you an example with women lawyers who are growing and they're hiring. Lawyers is always a very scary thing for solos to start hiring lawyers. They'll hire staff, but they won't hire lawyers, and you really don't get traction as a law firm owner until you start hiring lawyers.
Sure.
And I will, I'll talk to somebody and they'll be like, "Well, I hired somebody X years ago, and that didn't go well. And so I've never done it again. I've been had fear around it."
Yeah.
And I'll say that person moved on. They went on, they got another job someplace, they started their own firm, they got a job at a firm, they changed careers, whatever. They moved to Poughkeepsie, whatever it is they did. And you are still here stuck holding your law firm back because you haven't emotionally processed. You took it personally and said, "What did I do wrong? I'm never doing that again. That didn't work. I must be really bad at it. So I'm just not going to do it again." And I kind of liken it to, I'm like, imagine the first person you dated when you were out of high school or college or whatever. And you said, "Well, that was bad. I'm never doing that again." Most of us then wouldn't have married the people we married or be in the relationships we're in if we had done that. So,
Yeah.
but that is something that I think often human beings do, is we say, "Well, that was a mistake," and we never analyze it and say, "What can I do better?" And let's just have that little bit of hope or a little bit of faith that
Yeah.
I now have learned something, so I'll know what to ask to get the next person in that's going to be better.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you're saying, what some people say, they draw this conclusion: I'm not good at that. That's what people would call a fixed mindset as opposed to a growth mindset. Carol
Mm-hmm.
Dweck and her work around this, that's been very popular. Where a growth mindset would say, I'm learning this. I'm getting better at it, as opposed to this fixed, I was born not good at hiring a lawyer. Like, well,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
might mistake that first time, and let's learn and grow.
Yeah. I think that, and for particularly since I work with women law firm owners, I'm going to speak to the experience of having the many conversations I've had. A lot of that comes out of this sort of perfectionist, good girl mindset. We got good grades, which allowed us to do this. Then we got good grades here, allowed us to do that. We passed the bar. It's all very pleasing authority, pleasing other people. And then when you own your own business, there's nobody to please but yourself. You have to decide, what do you want? And a lot of people don't even consciously think about that. And so they're looking around and they're paralyzed because they have to make the right answer. They have to get the right answer because they're accustomed to, when I get the answer right, I get the gold star. When I get the answer right, I get the grade. I get the accolades and the praise and the reward. And then here you are in your own business, and there is no right answer. There is only your answer,
Right.
what you choose and what you decide, and how it works out. And then how it works out, you make it the next decision, and how that works out. And I think that is where a lot of high achieving women get stuck. They start their own firm, and they've never been. There's no external person that they have to please with their decisions, and they're paralyzed with analysis paralysis. And because lawyers are taught to be analysts, right? So we analyze everything. We can make an argument for both sides. So we don't want to make the wrong decision. We're perfectionists. We want to make the right decision. And there is no right decision. And so they stay stuck in this sort of place of, until I can make the right decision, until I have all the facts, until I have, and it's like, well, unfortunately, owning a business is one of those things where you have to make choices and decisions quickly and move on and what I often say to people is, you have to make that decision right for you instead of making the right decision. You have to make that decision right for you.
So, Davina, tell us more about what it means to be more of a systems driven firm. Professional services, I know you work nowadays, more specifically with women who are lawyers. But give us some examples of what it means to make the choice to be more systems driven.
Right. Okay. So I think a lot of people conflate systems and automation in
Mm,
this day and age.
sure.
And so when I say, so oftentimes lawyers will say to me, I need better systems. And what they often mean is, did I buy the right case management system? Or I saw
Yeah.
somebody talking about a system, the software that they bought, and I
Software.
interpret that as a
Yeah.
system.
Yeah.
So first, I would say that systems are really just about a process of doing repetitive things the same way every time, or as close to the same way as you can get it. So if there's any task in your business that is repetitive, then we want some written down procedures or processes that where we have written it down, get it out of our head. The most business owners will say, "Oh yeah, I have a system for that. It's in my head." Well, if it's in your head, you don't have a system for it. You have your own ideas and thoughts about it, but you haven't written it down and conveyed it to somebody else so that they can do it. So that theoretically anybody can do it who's qualified in this area, right?
Mhm.
So it's really about taking those repetitive things, getting them down on paper or video these days or audio or however people learn, but having these step-by-step processes that other people can take over and do those, because you can't expand your business beyond yourself unless you can teach other people to
Mhm.
do parts of what it is that you do
Right.
and the way that you want it done, right? So other people can come in with their ideas of how they want it done, but if you want things done a certain way, you have to be able to convey it. And
Mhm.
oftentimes we just think people are supposed to read our minds. So when you start to develop systems, I'll give you some examples that in a law firm that also apply in other businesses.
Yeah.
A marketing system. So
Mhm.
attorneys are notorious for saying, "Well, most of my business comes from referrals." And that's great. And if you're relying on the benevolence of others to send
Mhm.
you business, and let's say you've got two or three people that are your best referrers, maybe a colleague, maybe a past client, that person dies, there goes your business referrals from that person, right? Something
Sure.
happens, they move, you're dependent on somebody else's good will and good behavior. And that's wonderful. We love to nurture relationships and have that with people. And we also need a systematic approach to getting clients in automatically that don't come from our personal networking and don't come from the benevolence of other generous people who send clients to us.
Yeah.
Because if you're growing a business that is bigger than yourself, we need some automatic way for work to be
Mhm.
coming in. So that might mean setting up an advertising system, right? It might mean a system for training people who work for you to do some of the marketing tasks, that
Right.
need to be done to keep work coming in. This is all kinds of ways. It could be having a podcast and having a system for then how I take this podcast and leverage it to help me get clients, right? So all kinds of different platforms you could choose
Mhm.
and methods you could choose, but you need some systematic
Right.
approach to it that works month after month after month after month,
Right.
right?
Yeah. And so I'm an industrial engineer. So when we talk about systems, I know that doesn't necessarily mean software. It means how do we do the work? What's the structure? What are the standards? What are the expectations? How do we make things more consistent where we can? And it seems like having systems allows you to then get out of what you described as grading papers. Like I'll give a quick example. Like in manufacturing, traditionally people would try to inspect in quality. They would grade the product after it was built. And thankfully, some companies realize it's better to do it right the first time, which doesn't mean just lecturing people to do better, but you have systems
Right.
help people do the work right the first time to prevent mistakes. And then you still might have to do a little bit of grading depending on the severity. Like Toyota still inspects cars coming off the end of the line because if there's a problem, it could really harm or kill a customer. But they rely far less on that inspection, and they're more efficient
Right.
because they have systems or
Right.
they're
And I would say,
with that.
something like the manufacturing world is very clear. And we often use that as an example, like of an assembly line or something like that. Anytime you're manufacturing, there's certain processes and procedures you go through to do a thing and then to make sure it's up to standard and all of that. Well, in service-based businesses, it's very human driven still a lot, even though we have softwares that help us, right? Case management softwares, for example. But there's you have a team of people who are still doing things. And I'll give you an example of checklist. Okay,
Right.
very small thing that doesn't even occur to the owner of a law firm. That what if I give my team a checklist? These are all the things they need to check before they pass it for me to look at or before they come to me. And one of the things I'm a big advocate of is also teaching people how we think so
Hmm.
that you're passing this on to them, right? And there's different ways to do that. But how I get a lot of my women law firm owners to stop grading papers is I say, you're going to meet with this person for 30 minutes every day, and they're going to save all their questions and they're going to bring them to you, and they're going to take the notes, and you're going to verbally give them your feedback. And I said, so you should be and then that combined with checklist and written procedures,
Right.
they should sooner rather than later have fewer and fewer questions for you, because
Hmm.
they should be learning as they're going. Whereas it's like if you just mark up a document and you give it to somebody, whether you're doing it manually or on the computer, a lot. I got to tell you, I had a career as an assistant for a short while I was in school, and we just accept all and move on with our lives. Like there's no, or back then it was dictation, and you do a lot of rote, and you're not absorbing, you're just doing, right?
Sure.
So you're not really absorbing and learning. And I said, your job is to shift from being a doer in your business to being the mentor and teacher in your business,
Yeah.
so that other people then learn how to think the way that you do. Because we discount often how many years of experience we have and the knowledge, the depth of knowledge we have, and we think other people should know these things, right? And it's
Right.
like, well, how did you teach them that?
Yeah. I think a good coach, a good leader ensures quality by giving feedback and explaining the why instead of just telling them what to fix, or in some cases, just fixing it. Sometimes people say, you know what, it's easier, it's just easier for me to fix it. But then they end up fixing the same things over and over, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's a good book that I reference. It's called The Power of a System, and it's by John Fisher. I've never met John. John's an attorney in, I think, the Northeast, and he's a personal injury attorney. And I often get my clients to read it, even if they're not personal injury attorneys, because the way he writes the book is he sat down, he's written other books since then, but he sat down and he wrote it as though he was writing it to his team. When he started his business, he said, I'm going to write down all my thoughts. And it's always speaking to his team. And so he will say, in this firm, we do this. You have the power to do this and the authority to do that. And you have the tools, and here they are, blah, 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 blah. And then he says, why we do it this way.
Hmm.
And I love that, because why we do it this way is is makes them understand the reasoning behind it. Because a
Hmm.
lot of times people will say, well, you do all that, well, that's stupid, why are we doing it this way, we could do it this way instead. If they understand your why, now you're teaching somebody, now
Right.
you're getting them to apply those critical thinking skills.
And the why shouldn't be because we've always done it that way.
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things he talks about is closed door time. And he says, I have closed door time. And why we do it this way is because I need to have time to concentrate on this work that we've taken in, and I need to be uninterrupted to do that. And
Right.
he says, you also can have closed door time
Hmm.
if you need a period of time to work interrupted. And we do it this way so that we don't make mistakes. We can focus on our work, and so on and so forth. So just really, it may or may not even apply to you in terms of what he talks about personal injury, but the methodology, it's good just to see how he wrote that book,
Yeah.
because it really is eye-opening for people.
Yeah, and I'm smiling because what I'm hearing there is just good thinking and practices that I've learned from different sources, going back to
Right.
engineering or manufacturing, or a quick example in healthcare. Nurses, they can't lock themselves in an office, but healthcare has learned, or is still learning, that medication errors happen when nurses get distracted. And so in some hospitals, the nurse puts on like a high visibility smock or something that basically says, I'm doing medications, do not interrupt me, unless it's a life threatening
Right.
situation. Now you have to trust that the physicians and managers and others will respect that
Right.
visual, and that a nurse can't wear it all day long either. But there's
Yeah.
something to be said for checklists in healthcare and in other industries. This is all
Yeah,
such
I
good
love
stuff.
that. And maybe I need one of those smocks because I'm about to pack for a vacation. And if I get if my husband is talking to me, I always mess up everything that I'm doing. So I need one of those smocks. uh,
We
that when you talk about engineering, I worked for an engineering firm. Well, for several years of my marketing career, and I was hired because I was a writer and a technical writer, and I help them write their RFPs, their bids for government jobs and things like that. And it's a very systematic business, because we did a lot of highway work for the Florida Department of Transportation, so a lot of standards, a lot of quality assurance, a lot of you know uh, systems in place to have that consistency throughout the state in our transportation system. And of course, they did a lot of plan developments as well, same type of thing. So yeah, very much. And I will never be as systematic as an engineer, I'm sure. I'm very much more of a, visionary type person. And I love to have people who handle details for me. But
Mhm.
I say I'm an 80%er. I get things about 80% along, then I want somebody to finish the last 20%. But taking that mindset and applying it to your law firm, and I think we've seen since the pandemic, so many tools have been created for lawyers. I'm
Mm.
seeing a lot of firms in different practice areas that you would never think would be distributed remote workers. And we're still seeing that. And obviously, one of the things that when you have remote employees, like I have one client that has a family law attorney and she has locally remote teams. They all work from their home offices. You have to be much more systematic. You have to have much better systems because you can't just yell down the hall at Betty to grab me this or do this. You have to be much more organized in your thought process and in how you communicate with one another.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing a lot more of that because of that, for that reason.
Yeah. Well, Davina, thank you so much for being here today. Again, our guest, Davina Frederick, wealthy woman lawyer is the phrase to remember. Check out her podcast, and I really appreciate you sharing your I guess your core favorite mistake story. You shared some other mistakes, but I appreciate that you've shared the learning and how that's helped you, and the great tips about being a systems driven organization. I try to be a systems driven podcast.
You are. And it went very smoothly. I appreciate you having me here. I've enjoyed it a lot. I love talking shop and talking about business and, our mistakes and also what we can learn from them and how they, I think one of the most, powerful tools for helping us evolve as human beings is owning our own business because we really learn so much about ourselves in the process. So I appreciate you having me here to share.
Yeah. Well, Davina Frederick, thanks again.
Thank you.